Thank you all for being here today. Bonjour à tous et merci d'être des nôtres ce matin. I'm Brian Lee Crowley, and it's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, where we remain committed to engaging with the most pressing issues of our time, with clarity, with intellectual rigor, and moral purpose. And with that in mind, let me read to you a couple of headlines. Real headlines, as they say in Hollywood, ripped from the pages of publications as reputable as The Economist newspaper. Israel is sowing irreparable conflict in the Middle East. Israel is killing tens of thousands of innocent civilians in cold blood. Israel seeks regional hegemony and will stop at nothing to crush those who oppose it. Israel is a rogue state, defying international law and operating with impunity. And finally, Israel stands as an aggressor, its military machine unchecked, its hegemonic ambitions boundless. These are actual headlines that flood our screens, the rallying cries that echo through international institutions, the slogans that fuel street protests from London to Toronto to New York. And this is the lens through which much of the world sees the Jewish state. It's a dark and damning indictment, repeated so often that it is often accepted as fact, something that everyone knows. Fortunately, however, repetition does not make truth, or else history would simply be a compendium of convenient lies. In this case, history tells a different story about Israel, one of survival, of resilience, and an unwavering pursuit of peace, even in the face of unrelenting hostility. Israel does not have the luxury of ceasing fire and waiting for peace. It does not have the privilege of pretending that Hamas is a political movement rather than a genocidal death cult that embeds its fighters within civilian infrastructure, that hides behind women and children while plotting the slaughter of many more. Israel does not enjoy the protection of an international community that will ensure its security, nor does it expect such protection. Israel fights because it must. It defends itself because no one else will. And for this, Israel is condemned. The hypocrisy is staggering. Countries like Russia, that wage wars of aggression under the pretense of national security, are somehow allowed their justifications, while Israel, besieged, bombarded, vilified, must answer for every defensive action that it takes. Those who demand Israeli restraint never make the same demand of Hamas, of Hezbollah, or of the Iranian regime that bankrolls them. The expectation, it seems, is that Israel should simply endure the attack after attack without responding, absorbing casualties without complaint, sacrificing its people on the altar of international appeasement. But Israel is not and cannot be a passive victim. The Jewish state exists precisely because history has proven that the Jewish people cannot rely on anyone else to ensure their security. Israel stands because it must. It fights because it has no choice. Yet amid this storm of misinformation and bias, there are voices that rise above the noise. Voices that refuse to accept the entrenched narratives of enmity, voices that champion the cause of peace, not as an abstract slogan, but as a reality to be lived and savored. And one such voice belongs to the remarkable man we have the honor of welcoming this morning, Loay Alshareef. Loay is a Saudi intellectual and a tireless advocate for peace between Israel and the Arab world. He is among a rare and courageous group of individuals who have rejected the decades of hostility that have defined Middle Eastern politics. Where others see insurmountable barriers, he sees opportunity for dialogue. Where others embrace grievance, he embraces reconciliation. Where others cling to the past, he insists on building a future. And his work in promoting interfaith and intercultural understanding has made him a trailblazer in a region where supporting Israel was, until very recently, unthinkable. He has taken the brave and often lonely road of confronting misinformation within the Arab world, of challenging old dogmas and urging his fellow citizens to reconsider not only their political postures, but their moral obligations. He understands, as I like to think we also do at MLI, that peace is not given, it must be made. And it requires a courageous few to make it. The Abraham Accords marked a historic turning point in the Middle East, proving that the old feuds are neither inevitable nor insurmountable. They shattered the lie that peace between Israel and its neighbors was impossible. And while much work remains to be done, the Accords demonstrated something profound, that when allowed to choose freely, most people will choose prosperity over war, cooperation over division, and dialogue over destruction. But peace cannot be conjured out of nothing. It requires stewards, it requires champions, it requires defenders. It requires people who are willing to stand against the tide of misinformation, who are willing to take the slings and arrows that come with advocating for a new vision of the Middle East. And Loay Alshareef is one of those people. His efforts to challenge and reshape how the Arab world sees itself and sees Israel are not just courageous, they are essential. He has stood firm in the belief that the future of the Middle East must be built on partnership, not perpetual grievance. He has dared to suggest that Israel is not an enemy, but a natural ally, that the old conflict need not define future generations, that peace is not a fantasy, but a choice. This morning, he will sit down with MLI's own senior fellow, Casey Babb, an expert in international security, and the head of our Promised Land project, which many of you are familiar with, to discuss the antipathies, the players, and the prospects for peace in the Middle East. This is a conversation that is as urgent as it is necessary, and there is no one better qualified to lead that conversation than the guest we are privileged to have amongst us this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Loay Alshareef to the podium. Now, after some brief opening remarks from Loay and Casey will sit down and have an armchair conversation, followed by a Q&A with you. Welcome, Loay.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Thank you for coming. And it's a long trip from Abu Dhabi to Ottawa. Wow, very long trip, but it's worth it. So, first of all, I want to give you a sense of hope of an Arab and a Muslim voice that is coming from the region to tell you the truth about what's happening, and I hope that it could be an eye-opener to so many of you. I don't want to defend Israel so much because we have an Israeli ambassador here already. We cannot have two ambassadors, but when it comes to Israel, I defend Israel strenuously because of my journey that really should give you hope of how people can change. I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia. I was raised a very religious Muslim. I memorized the whole Quran, 114 chapters, at the age of 16. I read the 6 books of Sunnah, Bukhari, Muslim, At-Tirmidhi, An-Nasa'i, Ibn Dawood. I know them by heart. I can call myself that I was a very extreme Muslim who really believed in so many things that you hear right now on the streets of Canada, US, Britain, and elsewhere. Enmity between Israel and Muslims is eternal. We can never trust Jews and Christians or take them as friends. We have so many verses and so many narratives attributed to Prophet Muhammad that teach you lots of things that happened in the 7th century, and we believe that these are continuously applied in all times. Until 2010 happened. 2010, I flew to France to learn French. By coincidence, I lived with a French family that was Jewish. And you don't want to know what happened when I saw the big Star of David in their living room. I was about to scream that I couldn't be living with a Jewish family, and I wrote an email to the school. I still have the email. I don't feel proud of it, but this part of my journey, I asked for a transfer because I don't feel comfortable being with a Jewish family. Thank God that family was Mizrahi Jewish family. They had very good food. And food actually did it. Two Shabbat dinners, and then I was convinced, okay, you know what? I'm gonna listen more. Actually, in that stay, in the 9-month stay, I had this inner battle between convictions that I had when I was in school and realities. And I saw lots of my convictions shatter when it comes to Israel and Judaism. We had so many great discussions in that period. I went to France to study French, ended up learning Hebrew and Judaism. It was a very strange thing to happen. But when I went back to Saudi, I do remember that I had a discussion with my mom that I started to have a change of heart of so many things that were taught because I've seen them like shattering in front of my eyes. My mom told me, Loay, 2 months and you will go back to the Loay that we know. You're under a sudden fascination with this family. 15 years. Not 2 months, 15 years and counting. You know why? Because when you're indoctrinated with an idea or with an ideology, this is what you know. Why do you hate Jews? Because we have narratives or we have hadiths or we have incidents that tell us we should hate Jews and Christians. Have you ever met a Jew? No. Do those who hate Jews in Arabia or in the Arab world, have they ever met a Jew? Never met a Jew, never met an Israeli. They never been to Israel. With all my advocacy for Israel, I only been to Israel the first time in 2024, in November, the time of war. And it was an absolute great visit. When I realized what Israel is giving to the world and why Israel is being fought. But I want to say that I started my advocacy 2017 for people to people, Muslim-Jewish reconciliation. I decided to learn that Islam as a faith has many versions. There is a radical Islam and there is a spiritual Islam. There is a spiritual Islam where a Muslim prays, fasts, go to Mecca, perform Hajj, and be a good citizen in the community that he lives in. And this is a Muslim that no one should be against. But there are Muslims who take Islam into a radical version to proselytize others to live the way they want to live and to, that's the most important, and to mandate their way of living and to control them. This is the problem that the West doesn't understand. And when I say the West, I'm saying Canada, US, UK, and other places. They don't understand that there are so many radicals who come to your country not to assimilate, but to mandate. Not to assimilate, but to actually take control of your liberal freedoms and misuse them in order to change the society. And this is so dangerous. And this is why I want to say that I'm so privileged and honored that there is an organization here in Canada called Secure Canada. It launched an initiative that is called Counter Muslim Voices. It promotes Muslim voices that stand against the radicals and the extremists to speak up and to support them, differentiate between radical Islam and spiritual Islam, and to stand against those radicals, especially that we are the ones who know who the radicals are. Ask those who overcome radicalism how radical Islam really looks like and how it's dangerous. So why am I fighting the good fight for combating anti-Semitism? Because I know for sure history. I love history. I'm a history buff. I was known in Saudi Arabia as the person who introduced history and civilizations to the Saudis, this history of the Nabateans, the Lihyanids, the ancient Arabian civilization that Saudi Arabia is known for. But when I spoke about Israel, no, this is not, okay, you're a history expert, but not when it comes to Israel. So I started to talk about Israel's history to the Arab world and telling them that the Jews are not foreign colonialists in their ancestral homeland, that Zionism is absolutely a national movement, calls for the right of the Jewish people of self-determination in their ancestral homeland, that Zionism is not a slur, it's not an insult to be a Zionist. And I really do this counter voice by doing something that I would say, reclaiming the narrative, by pushing counter narratives. So we have so many counter narratives in the Arab world, for example, that Jesus is Palestinian. And I do this counter-narrative by telling the world or telling my fellow Arabs the real narrative. So I made this one real narrative one day, a couple of months ago, and it went viral on Al Jazeera when I said Jesus was a Zionist. And people were saying, how dare you say this? I said, wait, let's go back to what Jesus said. Let's go back to his teachings. Let's go back to who he really was. He was born in Bethlehem of Judea. He was raised between Capernaum and Nazareth. He called the land Israel in the Gospel of Matthew. Verily I say to you, you will never go back, you will never go through all the cities of Israel until the Son of Man comes. He talked to the Samaritan lady near to Shechem, and he told her, you worship God on a mountain that you do not know, Mount Gerizim, but we worship God on a mountain that we know because salvation comes from the Jews. What a progressive Palestinian Jesus was, if that's what it means. And then, by creating these counter-narratives from someone who was very extreme when he was young, it makes people ponder and think why this person is speaking the truth. Anti-Semitism starts with Jews, but it ends with everyone else. And history should always remind us of this fact. In World War II didn't start because there was a war between Britain and Germany in Europe, or a war between the United States and Japan in the Pacific. World War II started because Nazi Germany expanded in the late 1930s. And this is why it's very important for you to know that anti-Semitism starts with Jews and Israel, but it ends with the Westerners, and it ends with people like me, Arabs and Muslims who stand against those radicals, who tell people the truth about the Middle East, who tell people the truth about how the Middle East should prosper, who tell people the truth that Jews are not foreign, Jews are our cousins, and they are back to their ancestral homeland. And Jews never left. There was never a discontinuous presence of the Jews in the land of Israel. Since they were kicked out, when Hadrian kicked them out after the revolt, they still remained in Judea or in Israel, but they were not dominant. 1947, Israel was not created. Israel was reborn. Israel is not 76 years old. Israel is 3,000 years old. It's one of the fewest countries or states in the world that has its name in history. And this is why I'm saying history and archaeology is the most important weapon that Israel is not using so well. And those who oppose it, they should learn a lot about archaeology and facts. I had a conversation with a friend of mine when I was in Israel in my visit. He told me, Loay, stop linking everything to Israel. I told him, Ilyas, he's Saudi from Jeddah. I told him, Ilyas, I will start doing so when you change your name. Because your name is Ilyas. You are named after a Jewish prophet who lived in the land of Israel. His name was Eliyahu, but you have the Greek name of his name. Ilyas comes from Eliyahu, which is the Lord is my God. And by the way, I am here in Haifa, standing on the mountain that the very person you're named after stood here against 400 false prophets of Baal, calling them to worship the God of Israel. Mount, you know what's the mount? Mount Carmel, exactly. So he said, no, we know Elias is a prophet and that's it. Don't get me beyond that point. And that is the problem. And that is the missing link that many Arabs and Muslims don't really have. Also similar to an Egyptian friend of mine, he's also an extended family member. His name is Yunus. He is so mad at me. He is so mad at everything that I post, he's so mad at it. I said, Yunus, let me remind you that your name comes from the Greek form of Yonah, which means in Hebrew, a dove. That's a Jewish prophet. That's an Israelite prophet. That's a Hebrew prophet who was so Zionist that when God told him, go to Nineveh because their evil has risen, he said, how could you send me to the enemies of my people and ask for their repentance? And I know that you would forgive them. In fact, I'm not going to go to Assyria. I'm not going to go to Nineveh. And then you are named after that very prophet. And then you're saying that Israel is not legitimate. Israel is a foreign colonialist state. Lots of education needs to be done. And this is what I do on social media. I educate my fellow Arabs and Muslims about Israel because I believe that it's a common heritage between Muslims and Jews. It's a very common heritage. And also, on the other side, fight radicalism that I know very well how it starts and I know very well how it ends. And heed the warning from those who know. Dear people of Canada, because you do not really know what these people do. As I said it, many radicals who we kicked out of our countries, they come to your country not to assimilate, but to dominate. Please remember, they don't come to assimilate. They don't come to become a law-abiding citizens of Canada. They come to dominate, and they want to preach you that what made them flee is what's going to make you prosperous. And because you are kind-hearted people, especially Canadians, very kind-hearted people, they are not aware of how their liberal freedom is being misused to promote lots of anti-Semitic rhetoric that will be having fierce consequences even on the Canadians themselves, even if they are not Jews. This is why I fight the good fight, and I believe it's a good fight. It's a fight that comes with a price, and I paid the price, and I will continue paying the price. But you know what? Zero regrets. You know why? Because those people who are against the Western values and against Canada and against the US and against Israel, one day I was in their shoes. I saw the darkness, and I saw how it looks like. And thank you so much. I'm not going back. And I've seen the light. I've conquered the darkness. I defeated it proudly. I lost friends. I gained more amazing friends. I lost opportunities. I gained more amazing opportunities. And this is a good fight. I'm doing this for myself, for my fellow Arabs, and most importantly, for Abraham, to see his children prosper and thrive together in the Middle East. Thank you.
Loay, it's going to be hard to top that. You're so eloquent and you're great. But I want to dive into things. We'll have a bit of a chat, and then Brian mentioned we'll have a bit of a Q&A as well. Because I know a lot of people in the room are going to have questions for you. Of course. You know, we don't hear things like that too often. You've said, I've listened to a lot of your interviews. We've talked quite a bit. You've said that in times of hardship, it's hard to convince everyone of peace. And, you know, in Canada, as you know, and you've talked about this, you talk about it on social media and on podcasts and public speaking, not just Jews in this country, but just decent people in this country are experiencing hardship and have been experiencing hardship since October 7th and even before then, but it's been very acute since then. A lot of people, myself included, often find it challenging to convince others of this hardship or to illuminate the realities of life for the Jewish community in this country. What are some of the tools and strategies? You touched on them a bit there, but how do you convince people? How do you reach people? And sort of what obstacles do you encounter when you're doing that? And what works and what doesn't work?
So first of all, for Jews who are having this hardship, I would advise that please grow your alliance with your non-Jewish friends. Your non-Jewish friends are your best ally in this battle, and Jews are not very large in numbers, so we have to remember that. And especially Arabs and Muslims who stand with the Jewish people and who stand with peace would be your best ally, so grow your alliance. And that's one. Two, yes, there are people who don't want to listen. There are people who don't want to listen because it's in their mind the biggest misinformation that Israel has. You know what is the biggest misinformation that we need to tackle on an official level and then public level? That Israel is a white colonialist result of a European colonialism. Right. That Israel is an illegitimate state. That there are people who claim or who say that they are Jews but stand against Israel. By the way, I met some of them here in Ottawa, right, in Canada. Natori Karta. I love them. You know, I love having discussion with them.
Right.
And I went to a rabbi and I said, "Dear Rabbi, please, as someone educated about the Bible, could you please tell me why you're against Zionism?" And the rabbi, he told me that because I am a Zionist, I'm a Muslim Zionist, so I really want to understand why you're against Zionism. This is the ancestral land of Israel. Israel is part of the faith. He said, well, listen to me very well. He said, well, we are not allowed to go back to the land of Israel without a divine order. But when Mashiach comes, we will. He said, so you are Zionists in the waiting. You are Zionists in the waiting. So the problem is not going back to Israel. You only have a problem with not having a divine order to go back to Israel. and you're also believing in rebuilding the third temple. He said, yes, we believe in rebuilding the third temple, but your allies who shout for you are not saying this.
Right.
So this is very important. And also I told the rabbi, I'm really sorry, I have great respect for all of you and for all the Jewish denominations, but seeing Neturei Karta Jews celebrating Hanukkah is actually preposterous, because Hanukkah is the most Zionist festival of all festivals.
Right.
Hanukkah is about Judah the Maccabi, Mattatyahu, and the Maccabees fighting against the Seleucids for their own determination in the land of Israel.
Yeah.
So how could you celebrate Hanukkah then? So because of this confusion, many people are confused in the Arab world by saying, we're not against the Jews, we're against the Zionists, and this is a big lie.
Right.
This is a big lie. And second of all, that people think of Israel as a foreign colonialist state. So debunking this misinformation is so important. And for the Jews, growing your alliance with your non-Jewish friends, especially the Arabs and Muslims and the Christians, of course, as well, is very important in fighting this fight.
Yeah. Keeping on this idea of convincing people, of reaching people, I was on the phone last night with Erwin Kotler, and Erwin and I were talking about the fact that there's an election coming up, a few weeks away, 4 weeks away. Jewish community and allies of the Jewish community in this country are wondering, what is the result going to mean for us? It's going to be a new government either way, to a certain extent. If you were sitting down with an incoming prime minister in a country like Canada that is really gripped by these issues. There was a man who ran down Elgin Street a few days ago wearing a Hamas sort of outfit. They're talking about that in Toronto. They're talking about that in Europe. I mean, our extremism crisis here makes headlines around the world. What would you tell the Prime Minister about, what would you warn the Prime Minister about, and what are the key messages that you would try to convey?
I would tell him, dear Prime Minister, please listen to a voice from the region who knows extremism so well. Please listen to the voices like the Foreign Minister of the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed, when he warned against extremism back in 2017. And he made a prophecy that there will come a day when people will flourish because of when the extremists will flourish because of the lack of decision making, thinking that they know Islam better than us, and this is absolutely wrong. I would say to the Prime Minister, listen to the voices from the region that warn you of two things. First of all, incitement is not free speech. Incitement is not free speech. And even if you're saying that, and unfortunately some Canadians told me this, that according to the Canadian law, if you are supporting Hamas without being part of the movement itself, this is freedom of speech. So some regulations have to be changed.
Right.
If I would advise the Prime Minister, I would tell him, Mr. Prime Minister, intimidating Jewish students in school and campuses is not freedom of speech. I met so many Jewish students here in Canada, in Montreal, in Toronto, in different places, and they told me they were afraid to go to a class because they are being intimidated by the pro-Hamas supporters. This is not freedom of speech.
Right.
And I want to tell him that if you think it will not get to you and to your other fellow Canadian citizens who are not Jewish, trust me, you are wrong. We know exactly how these people think. They want to dominate. They are using the liberal freedom as a ladder to climb and achieve whatever they want. As soon as they get what they want, they will throw the ladder away. Be aware of the danger of the Muslim Brotherhood and of those radicals who are not welcome in countries in the Arab world that are very progressive, that are very moderate, that are very modern, like the UAE, like Saudi Arabia. Why do you think a UAE, like a Muslim country like the UAE or Saudi Arabia, banned the Muslim Brotherhood? And how do you think, and how do you feel when they are banned, they come and find refuge in Canada, in London, in Leeds, in Birmingham? I was so worried last week when I was in Leeds, and I saw the Islamic Relief everywhere. You know, Islamic Relief is a terrorist organization in the UAE. And I say to the British people, or to the people of England, you don't really get it. You don't understand. The only country that is, in my opinion, that is waking up, understand this danger is now the US. This current administration, what it's doing with the students, when it happens to revoking the visa because of those people who support Hamas or this is the right thing to do. By the way, no country in the world is obliged to explain to the students or to the visitors why your visa is revoked. It could be your visa is revoked without further explanation. But there are explanations that make sense. Supporting Hamas, supporting a terrorist group that kidnaps toddlers, that started this ugly war that we're talking about right now. It's an ugly war. Of course it's an ugly war. But it's a war. I'm sorry, Mr. Ambassador, I don't want to take your position in defending Israel. It's a war that Israel didn't ask for, didn't want, and didn't start. It's an ugly war. It's an ugly war that Hamas can end right now if it releases the hostages and lays down its arm. It's an ugly war. When people say, oh my God, in the Arab world, when this will stop? And they show the devastation of Gaza. This will stop when Hamas releases the hostages. Right. Immediately, and lays down its arms. So I would advise this Prime Minister, the voices from the region, the Arabs and Muslims voices in specific from the region who know the danger of this radical extremism will be your ally in telling you what works good for your country.
Right.
And I'm telling you, it is not a good idea to harbor those people or to welcome them in a way that this is like freedom of speech and this is no one can take it away from us. It will hunt you and it will come to your doorstep soon. Heed the warning of those who know.
One issue that I would imagine would be influencing the way that a prime minister is thinking about these issues, in the same way that it constricts my thinking and ability to speak freely sometimes about these issues, is this fear of being labeled Islamophobic. Wow. And in large part, there's been a blurring of the line, intentionally, in my opinion, between actual anti-Muslim discrimination, which I think is a more accurate way of talking about Islamophobia. To me is not the right way to frame that sort of train of thought. It would be something closer to anti-Muslim discrimination. There's been a blurring of the line between that and then criticism, legitimate criticism of political Islamism. And that's something that a lot of people struggle with, whether we're writing op-eds or on podcasts or public speaking.
This is why it's important to come from the counter-Muslim voice.
Yes.
First of all, as the people say in France, je suis d'accord avec toi. I totally agree with you. The word Islamophobia is a word created by extremists to protect them from being criticized for their actions. Now you hear it from an Arab and a Muslim. There is a difference between anti-Muslim bigotry and Islamophobia. You have valid reasons or rational reasons to be afraid of Al-Qaeda. I'm afraid of Al-Qaeda. I'm afraid of ISIS. I'm afraid of Hamas. Of course, they keep threatening even the Arab and Muslim voices who stand against them. And by the way, it's so preposterous, allow me to say this, that many of those who threaten the Muslim and Arab voices, they reside in Vancouver and in London and Washington, D.C. And they call us Zionists and traitors. We are traitors, while they are living in Canada, they are living in the US, and they don't see this treason. So there is a difference between anti-Muslim bigotry, a person who doesn't who actually takes action for Muslims for being Muslims, like the one that happened, for example, in Christchurch in New Zealand, when someone walked into a mosque, killed the people peacefully praying in a mosque. This is anti-Muslim bigotry. But criticizing the radical extremists who take cover with Islam is not Islam. First of all, I tell you, this word has to be stopped from using. There is nothing called Islamophobia. There is anti-Muslim bigotry, and it's different from criticizing those radicals. But they are using the Islamophobia as cover to protect them from being criticized.
Right.
And this is why you need many Muslim voices who tell the people of Canada, the people of the US, the people of Europe, the truth about those radicals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, because the word Islamophobia is irrational fear. Many people have rational fears, especially when it comes to Europe, especially when it comes to immigration, especially when it comes to people who think that You know, there was a Polish politician, I don't blame him. I don't blame him at all. He said, we have a very strict policy when it comes to Muslim immigration. But guess what? We have zero problems. You can't argue with him.
Right.
He's making very valid points.
Right.
Of course.
This is maybe in Poland.
And there are regulations, Casey, that needs to be, I'm telling you, there are so many that need to be adjusted. If you're coming to Canada as an immigrant, or if you're coming to the US, and you are not planning to assimilate, but to dominate and hope that one day you will be able to change the demography of this country, then you shouldn't be granted this visa. There has to be some sort of background checks, or there has to be, and I love what Mark Rubio, the Secretary of State, said, even if you are granted a visa, your actions will be monitored even after your visa is being issued.
Yeah.
Of course, and I totally support that.
Yeah.
Because many countries in the Arab world are doing this.
Yeah.
So United States shouldn't be, or Canada or other countries shouldn't be an exception.
Speaking of the Arab world, you're coming from Abu Dhabi, Saudi. You understand the Arab world. You run in these circles. Where does that sort of pragmatism, that clarity, where does that come from in the UAE, for instance? Why are they thinking about things in such a different way than, say, Canada? And what could Canada learn from?
That's a very good question, because you know why? Because Muslim Brotherhood was operating in the UAE in late 70s and late 80s and late 90s. The leaders of the UAE were actually thinking that the Muslim Brotherhood is an Islamic movement that wants to prosper in the region, but then they saw the reality of these movements. Saudi Arabia did the same. Egypt did the same also with the Muslim Brotherhood when they took over control, and then they wanted to change lots of the system.
Yeah.
So this clarity comes from
experience.
Experience,
Yeah.
exactly. And when we advise our friends in the West, it's because for their own, because we don't want to see the fall of Europe. I don't want to see the fall of Canada. I don't want to see the fall of the US. But when I go to England, I really don't feel comfortable seeing the slogan "From the river to the sea" on the Parliament. And I ask my Canadian, or I ask my British friends, do you really understand what the word "from the river to the sea" in Arabic, with all the things that are interlinked in Hamas charter, really refer to? Do you understand that they refer to the final battle supposedly between Muslims and Jews? And I don't believe that this hadith is correctly narrated to Prophet Muhammad, that the enmity is eternal, and we will have a final battle where a Jew, not a Zionist, Tori Carter, hello, where a Jew hides behind a tree, and then a Muslim would say, "Oh Muslim," the tree would say, "Oh Muslim, there's a Jew behind me, come and kill him." And I always say to those who say so, especially in the Muslim, they say this hadith will happen in time when Jesus comes back, because as Muslims we believe that Jesus will come back. So I say, what if a tree was referring to Jesus as a Jew sitting behind him, because Jesus was also Jewish? So you see this contradiction.
Right.
So I would say that experience was actually the reason why this clarity, because Muslim Brotherhood were so active in the UAE, so active, and they were so welcomed by the leadership, but they misused this, and they are now taking their cancer from the countries that they failed to the countries that want to fail. And I hope it is not too late for Canada, at least. I think it's too late for the UK.
Is that right?
And I say this to my British friends, yeah.
You feel that there?
I feel it. I feel like it's, when I saw the Islamic relief everywhere, and I say, oh my God.
Do you feel safe in the UK?
I feel in some areas in the UK, but not really in London, really. It's becoming Londonistan.
Right.
And those people are not really aware of what's gonna bring them. It's gonna bring them chaos and anarchy, and I don't want this to happen.
Right.
We don't want this to happen.
No, of course. On keeping in this line of thinking in the Middle East, you're on social media. You have a huge social media presence. You speak all over the world. You interact with Arab communities all over the world.
I speak in Arabic, English, different languages as well. I speak also in Arab media that are anti-Israel, because they want to hear a different point of view. So I explain to them with all of these counter narratives about the reality of Israel.
Since October 7th, what is your take on how the Arab world, the Arab street, is responding to the situation in Israel and beyond, in the Middle East, in Syria, in Iran, in Lebanon. Are you getting the sense from people that things are changing incrementally but positively, or worsening, or is it a lot of the same? What's your sense on that?
So I'm always hopeful,
Yeah.
always hopeful. But when October 7 happened, even before Israel retaliated, even before Israel thought of the ground invasion, even before any statement from the government of Israel, even before Bibi Netanyahu said the Bible says there's a time for war and there's a time for peace and there's a time for war, people were rushing into condemning Israel.
Mm-hmm.
People were rushing into, unfortunately, I would say 7 out of 10 people were supportive of what happened on October 7 because they viewed this as resistance. And I'm telling you, it's really disastrous, but not in the UAE, not in
Right.
Saudi, not in moderate Arab states.
Right.
But you can see this, unfortunately, in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Algeria, in Yemen, of course, in some other countries. So, but I remain hopeful. You know why? Because I personally believe October 7 happened for a single reason. Hamas wanted to disrupt the Abraham Accords being expanded with Saudi Arabia, and they realized that, and this is the only way for them to disrupt this Abraham Accords. Well, I have bad news for them because eventually it will happen. We are monarchies. We follow our leaders. So when the leaders normalize and they say this is the best of our interests and the best for our people, many people will follow suit, even though it's challenging because of the war. And when people come to me and say, what about the Palestinians, our dearly brother Palestinians? I say to them what I say everywhere else. I say war is ugly, and I absolutely sympathize with the Palestinians for losing their lives in Gaza. You know, the Bible or the Talmud and the Quran, they share the same commandment when it comes to if you kill one person, if you kill one innocent person, you kill all humanity. And if you save one innocent person, you save all humanity. And I say to them, I share with you the grief. And I wish that those Palestinians, even though I don't trust the Ministry of Health in Gaza,
Right.
which is Hamas, I would say the 10,000 or the 20,000 who were killed, they shouldn't have been killed.
Yeah.
And this war shouldn't have happened. But please, let us put the pressure on the right party. And the right party is not Israel. The pressure should not be on Israel. The pressure should be on Hamas that started this war, and now it's eager to end this war, to release the hostages, lay down its arms. Even the moderate Arab states see no future for Hamas. Even the European Union sees no future for Hamas. The US, Canada, and other states, they see no future for Hamas. So what is the point of fighting? I'll tell you what is the point of fighting. It's a death cult. It's a pathological creed that believes in an apocalyptic apocalypse where millions die on both sides, and killing a Jew is a way to paradise. If you've heard the recordings of a Gazan militant who went into Israel and he said, "Mom, I killed a Jew."
Yeah.
Why do you think? Because he's indoctrinated with this bad idea. Lots of things need to happen. So I always say to my friends who say, "What about the war and what about the Palestinians?" And of course, no one wants to see the Palestinians die.
Right.
I believe the Palestinians have the right to live in dignity. I believe the Palestinians should focus on one important thing: having a Palestinian leadership that openly says, we want to live side by side with Israel. We will stop teaching our children Jew hatred, and we will accept the Jewish state as a neighbor, a partner, and we will thrive, live, and prosper together. If such a Palestinian leadership emerges, I promise you, you will see the Israelis in Tel Aviv marching into the streets asking for a Palestinian state. But we don't have this leadership.
Right.
We don't have this leadership until now.
Right.
So it is not really gloomy and cloudy. In total, there is hope, and there are signs of hope. And I'm very hopeful that the Abraham Accords will be expanded. I have very good news to those who launched October 7. You failed. The Jewish people defeated Haman, Achashvarosh, Antiochus Epiphanes, Hitler, and now they defeated also radical Islamists. And it's a shame that a group of people who say that they belong to a faith that in its book honored the children of Israel against their oppressors are now becoming the oppressors of the children of Israel in the 21st century. Shame.
Oh, well said. As you know, I think we've talked about this a little bit, and I think you've posted about it on social media. The people of Gaza are, some people in Gaza are protesting now.
Yes.
Risking their lives. Some of them have been killed since they've started protesting.
Yes, we should remember that.
That's not getting much attention here at all. You're not going to really see this on CBC or CTV. I have my ideas of why that is. What's your sense and of why those sorts of developments, they just don't make their way into the mainstream? And what do you think about that? And how can we do a better job of, taking the realities on the ground in Gaza, some of them which are very inconvenient to people that are sympathetic with the extremist cause? How do we help break that barrier?
So first of all, thank you for acknowledging the fact that there are people in Gaza protesting against Hamas. And I always say to people that Nietzsche said something very bright in Beyond Good and Evil. If you're fighting with monsters, you should take it to yourself that you should take it that you yourself don't become a monster. Mm-hmm. And I don't really agree with those who say all Gazans are Hamas.
Right.
I say this is wrong. There are Gazans who stood against Hamas, even from day one, even when October 7 happened. There are innocent Gazans, and there are Gazans who stand against Hamas, who protest against Hamas, and who paid their lives against Hamas. So why is this not taking to the dominant TV channels? The same reason why no one is paying attention to Muslims killing Muslims in Sudan, or the same when it happens to the same reason why when Muslim extremists kill Christians in Nigeria, no one is talking about it. No Jews,
right.
No news. This is actual. So the second reason is it does not really serve the purpose of telling the world the truth about the anti-Hamas crowds among the Palestinians.
Right.
There are many people, especially Al Jazeera. They don't like these protests, by the way, and they never show you that it was by the Palestinians. It shows you by traitors or by those who are not actually Palestinians. So it doesn't serve the narrative, the mainstream narrative that Israel is responsible for what's happening right now in this war.
Right.
And I'm saying this to people who say, but what about the reputation of Israel? I say yes, the reputation of Israel, there's been a lot of damage, but Israel now is in survival mode. When you are in survival mode, you fight for your very existence first, and then you see how to fix your reputation second. What happened on October 7 was horrendous, and it was pure evil, and everyone should know that. But I agree with you, we should put more focus on the Palestinians who are protesting against Hamas, who are protesting against the Islamic Jihad. I met many Palestinians in America and in different places who say, Loay, wallahi, we want to live side by side with Israel. We don't want to be ruled by those radical fanatics. And this is why, by the way, Casey, when you see what's happening right now, this is the end result of living under extremists and Islamists. And this should be a warning to Canada and to other people in the West that if these people reach power, they will just come to you with ties and tuxedos, but eventually they will be Hamas, and you will be having the same consequences that the people of Gaza are having because they accepted to be living under a Muslim Brotherhood faction, which is Hamas.
Yeah, absolutely. Loay, we have professors in the room, we have entrepreneurs, we have diplomats. I want to open it up for some questions. I see Ambassador Moed in the back here.
Just wanted to say thank you, first of all, for speaking your mind. You're not defending Israel. You are doing a great job for the people of the Middle East. You are an embodiment of values that you believe in, that we believe in, that others don't. And the way that you verbalize that challenge of difference between the values that we hold and others, I think is extremely poignant and very timely. When we are talking about love thy neighbor as thyself, this is what you're doing. And I thank you for that. I value that very much. I respect that very much because this is how we would like to see our whole world actually operating. I want to point to one thing that is happening here. I don't know if you're aware of that, but there's a group of Canadian Muslim lawyers that came up with an idea which is really preposterous, and that is called anti-Palestinian racism. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you ever heard of that concept, but to me it sounds like reenacting of the Nuremberg laws. Are Palestinians a race? What distinguishes them between others? And so the fact that they actually decide to call themselves a race so that they perhaps can compare this with anti-Semitism, or I don't know what. Jews don't think that they are a race either. But it's just preposterous. So this is an idea that is taking roots here in Canada, because people say, well, actually, yes, we have something against Islam, against Muslims, which is Islamophobia, and maybe also other phenomena, as you mentioned. But maybe if we look at it from a racial perspective, that will help us support them more, or I don't know what. It is, in my mind, one of the biggest challenges that I'm facing here in Canada, explaining to people why this is so fundamentally wrong, to talk about anti-Palestinian racism. There are a lot of issues and challenges that are fine politically and so on, maybe culturally, but not in that sense. So I just wanted to hear your observation.
I agree with you, Mr. Ambassador. And you need your allies to speak also the language of there's nothing called anti-Palestinian. By the way, the Palestinians are Arabs, and they were never called Palestinians before 1948. We have to understand that very well. The word Palestinian was actually a name for all the inhabitants of the land, even the Jews. This is why you say Golda Meir saying, I am a Palestinian in this sense. But then it became a word known for the Arabs living in the land of Israel after the UN resolution when it happened in 1947. So the Palestinians are Arabs. And even those who say, no, they are not, look at their last names.
Right.
Look at their last names. Their last names indicate where they originally come from, and they are Arabs. And the thing that we need to focus on right now is to how can we rehabilitate this Muslim-Jewish relations and this Arab-Israeli relations by actually working more and more on the Abraham Accords. And I believe that in the next 4 years, or the next even less than 4 years, we will see great progress when it comes to the Abraham Accords. But people in the West, especially in Canada, they really need to get their info from the right places, especially from the people of the Middle East.
Right.
So that no more confusions can happen, as the ambassador said.
Yeah,
and I agree with him that this is a great confusion, that many people in Canada who are not aware of the Middle East, who don't know where the Middle East actually, what's happening in the Middle East. No, they are not. It's not because they are ignorant, because they are so busy with their life, and they are law-abiding citizens, and they think that the anti-Israel crowd is the only crowd that is there. This is why I commend Secure Canada for supporting the counter-Muslim narrative. Those who say that there are Arabs and Muslim voices who speak against those radicals and who don't really want to have any interest in Canada. We are not living in Canada. We are living in our countries. We are so happy. But we are warning you because we see that you are going south.
Right.
And we are just giving you this warning. Heed our warning.
Right. Alan Kessel.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Did you have a question? Okay, great.
My name is Alan Kessel. Recently retired as the legal advisor to the Canadian Foreign Ministry, particularly on some of these tricky issues. I just want to thank you for your inspirational and quite revolutionary chat. But one of the questions that arises from your discussion is that we have to be careful about the survival of the Muslim Brotherhood in any form. If you extrapolate what you're saying, then what you're actually saying is that Israel has to prosecute this war, military action, to the point where it destroys Hamas. But of course, Hamas, being as clever as it is, has managed to hold on to 59, some alive, some dead hostages. It's a sort of an ever-decreasing circle, which means that they will never give up the last hostage. Is your suggestion that the hostage situation is something that has to be put aside and the destruction of this malevolent cancer has to be the thing you concentrate on? Because if anything, the Shalit case indicated that if you give 1,000 people for one, you know, appetite comes with eating, and we've now seen what the appetite looks like. And if you remain in that mode, you're going to have this again and again. So I know this is a toughie, but obviously the government of Israel is facing this. But what's their objective here, and what should be the end game?
So speaking of Shalit, you know that, I think most of you know that in Shalit release, or saving, Sinwar was released because of that. Sinwar was released in Shalit 2011. So I know lots of families, I know lots of hostage families. I know many of them, and it's hard to say that we should not focus on the hostages, because, you know, to them it's like the priority is to get the hostages out. And any decision maker in Israel is facing like a dilemma, what to do, to focus more on making a deal and releasing the hostages, or destroying Hamas. I do believe Hamas must be destroyed, or at least demilitarized, to give up their weapon. Hamas as an ideology can be defeated. And I always say this to even the non-Jewish audience who say, well, an ideology cannot be defeated. Well, I say, let's go back to Nazi Germany. What happened in Nazi Germany is a proof that an ideology can be defeated, but there has to be a will. So I wouldn't say what is right and what is wrong for what Israel is doing right now, focusing on releasing the hostages or destroying Hamas and putting some military pressure. But Hamas has to be destroyed in a way that October 7 is not repeated. Mm-hmm. And the only way is to do this is militarily. So, but I really sympathize with the Israeli hostages and those who were kidnapped from the Supernova Music Festival. I lost a friend, by the way, who was celebrating in the music festival. Her name is Imbar Shem Tov. May her memory be a blessing. And so many other Israelis that I know were kidnapped from that music festival, were killed in their homes, or were kidnapped from the kibbutz. When I was in Israel, I went to kibbutz Be'eri, and I met the families there. It was really horrific. So I don't really know what is the right thing to do, but I would say destroying Hamas should not be an option. It's an obligation. Mm-hmm. And the good thing is that they have no future in other places in the Arab world. They are not welcome. Their ideology and their Muslim Brotherhood ideology is not really welcome. They are welcome here in Canada, and they are welcome in the UK, and they are welcome in the US. Now in the US, no, the US, honestly, recently, I've seen great progress when it comes to telling the visitors and telling the students that this will not be tolerated anymore. Why can't Canada do this? Why can't the UK do this, really? Pastor?
Yes.
I can tell you why Canada can't do it. The issue is not so much Islamophobia, and this so-called Islamophobia that we're not supposed to speak about. It's three things. It's an aggressive relativism in this country. Mm-hmm. It's an inability to distinguish between good and bad, often, and it's cultural Marxism. So the cultural Marxism is the colonialist narrative. And I think the Muslim Brotherhood that is in charge of the two largest Muslim associations of this country, the Muslim Association of Canada and the National Council of Canadian Muslims, fully in league with the Brotherhood. This is known to those of us that work in this space. So those are the organizations that the government listens to at the provincial level, the federal level. And the government embraces this relativism that kind of governs a lot of our civic life in this country. Well, we have to listen to them. And they can't distinguish between good and bad narratives.
This is why we need to grow the counter-Muslim voice, like the Global Imam Council and other councils as well in Canada, to tell the government that these are not the only Muslim voices and they are really misleading you. Why? Listen to those who know, listen to those who were experienced with them, and they would tell you where they will lead the country to.
I think the relativism point and the cultural Marxism point is that a lot of Canadians will view, as much as they know about it, they'll view this narrative through a domestic lens. And so the whole language around colonialism here in Canada is bound up with our relationship with the indigenous peoples of this country, with that history. And so they see it maybe implicitly through that lens. And so this cultural Marxism is very, very powerful right now in the country. And so if someone is portrayed as the victim, or someone is portrayed as being oppressed by a colonial power, there might not be explicit support for that, but there's a sense that, oh, those Christians and those Jews, maybe they're getting what they sowed, they're reaping what they sowed. Whether we're speaking about Christians here in this country that ran residential schools or, Jews in Israel. So I think this is, in the Canadian context, there's many, many layers of both domestic issues that people often maybe implicitly see through those lenses when they're looking at the situation in Israel.
But this has to change, Pastor.
Absolutely.
And I always say this, I'm really grateful myself and the other Arab peace activists for people like Casey for bringing the counter-Muslim voice to speak up in so many venues. I am flying from Canada to the US. I'm going for the first time to Wyoming. Great place. I was invited by a Chabad there, and I was saying, do you have Chabads in Wyoming? Should I bring my cowboy hat or something? Because Wyoming to me is the Wild West. But the fact that you're bringing voices, myself, Amjad, and other people as well, to tell people in Canada and the US that there are other Muslim voices who stand for peace, who stand for the regional integration, and who know radicals so well is a way forward. And we cannot change people overnight, but at least we plant the seeds. Let us plant the seeds. Help us plant the seeds so that one day maybe a true change would happen. We don't really have an interest in Canada or in the US or in the UK as people who are visitors. We are warning this for your own sake because we've been there and we know how it looks like, and we're seeing now Europe is going to this direction, and we don't want that to happen because it will affect us all one day. It will affect us all.
I see a question here from Pamela. We've got a mic here for you, Pamela.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that the anti-Palestinian racism idea appears in the recent documents that the federal government produced on Islamophobia.
Pamela, just for people's awareness, you're
I'm a professor of history at Carleton University,
yes.
And one of the three executives of the Network of Engaged Canadian Academics, which is an ever-growing organization fighting anti-Semitism in the universities. So my question is just a point like this, anti-Palestinian racism is taking hold here in some very difficult ways. What should I be having my students read? Where should I find all this? Where is this discussion going on, which I could say to my student, go read this. This is what I can assign in my classes. What can you direct me to?
That's a very good question, and we have a lack of academia when it comes to this kind of topic, but we need to work on that. I cannot really direct your students to some sort of a book or a place to read, but at least the statements from the officials in the Arab world, like the Sheikh Abdullah and his sessions. And sessions like this for the peace activists, learning from different voices, is very important. But we have a problem in the academic field in the Arab world by letting a different voice to speak up, and this is warning. This is alarming. And I always say that one of the things that need to happen immediately after this war ends in Gaza is the de-radicalization. And I believe the UAE will play a great role in this de-radicalization because the education system in the UAE promotes tolerance, coexistence, and even the government itself. It promotes the Abrahamic family house where you have a church and a synagogue and a mosque sitting side by side.
They completely changed their educational curriculum.
Absolutely. You know when that happened, to be specific? After 9/11, when 2 perpetrators were from the UAE, 15 from Saudi, my God, 1 from Egypt and 2 from Lebanon. At that time, Sheikh Mohammed was so annoyed that 2 of his citizens were actually participants in this terror attack. So he decided to do an overhaul of the education system. And 10 years ago, we didn't have Ministry of Tolerance in the UAE.
Right.
Now you have a Ministry of Tolerance. You have a Year for Humanity. You have Christians flourishing in the UAE from different denominations. And also there's a big Hindu temple that was inaugurated like a year ago. So this is the kind of education that we need to convey to other people. But I agree with you. No, we have a lack of education when it comes to academics, and also when people say, where should I go? Where should I read? Where should I read? Yeah, we don't have much of that.
Right. You have a question in the back there. Oh, Jacques.
Thank you so much. I too thank you very much for your courage and your voice, which is so incredibly important. So many questions, but so grateful the way you've expressed yourself. My concern after a number of years as we've been watching a very uphill battle in getting some of these messages out and looking at university campuses and looking at the way in which obviously the community just feels assaulted on so many sides. How does one address the media? I mean, we touched on that maybe just a little bit, but I think when I look at our national broadcaster, the CBC, and I look at the difficulty of being able to get information into the hands of the journalists, they get into the hands of the journalists, but the journalists will do nothing with it. And we just look at the outlets that simply refuse to share the truth. And for me, voices can be many, but when you're using the media in such a way, and when we have our phones basically spewing out what it does, it's such a difficult battle to communicate against that.
It's a difficult battle, but the media you're referring to, the legacy media?
Generally, the media that we're seeing out there. I mean,
No, I believe our fight should be on social media. Legacy media is dying. Social media is trending. And we should do the fight on social media, like on X, Instagram, TikTok. I don't know if it's popular here in Canada or not. Yeah. TikTok. Yeah, we should do that. Okay, legacy media doesn't want to listen. Fine. Legacy media is already dying. But social media is not dying. And social media, we need to grow the alliance and to have more and more voices speak. I always say to my Jewish and Christian friends who are in this battle, let's collaborate, all of us together. Let's make people know the truth, and we keep fighting the good fight. But let's forget about legacy media. It's really dying. It's really dying.
It's interesting. I mean, I could see that as a very important battleground. And as I was sitting here next to Ambassador Moed through the last couple of years, I said how we are losing the public relations battle, how difficult it is. And while we're very significantly able to address things on the battlefield, this is another battleground that we're losing.
I don't think you're losing. I don't think you're losing. I think maybe you're struggling, but not losing.
Good.
Eventually, people will know the truth, especially when this war ends, because it reminds me when I was a kid, for example, when I saw 9/11 when I was a kid. Al Jazeera made me believe that 9/11 was a response to the aggression of the United States of America in different parts of the Muslim world. And I will never forget that. Please remember this date, 29th of October 2004. Al Jazeera broadcasted a videotape by bin Laden justifying what happened 3 years earlier in 2001. You know what he said? Bin Laden said that what really inspired him to bring down the two towers in Manhattan, was that in 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon and destroyed high-rise buildings in Beirut, and that really made him think from that time that he would revenge America with this attack. And Al Jazeera depicted this as, you see, 9/11 is justified. You see how dangerous media is? So, two things: we need to keep fighting the good fight on social media, forget about the legacy media, and we should actually meet with the policymakers and decision makers, telling them that what so many channels are doing is not freedom of speech. It's really incitement, especially Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera is banned in the UAE, is banned in Saudi Arabia. But Al Jazeera is flourishing in different countries, including Canada. And Al Jazeera is a hypocritical news channel, because in English, Al Jazeera English defends the LGBT community. But Al Jazeera Arabic is the official spokesman for Hamas. You see this hypocrisy? Good people in Canada, people of good heart in Canada, and Canadians are so good-hearted people, they don't get it. They think, oh, you know what, it's all freedom. We get it, and we know their lies so well. So I wouldn't say that you're losing. You are struggling, and we are all struggling, but we see the light at the end of this tunnel, and we will prevail, inshallah.
Thank you. Just one last point. I think for us in Canada, and when I speak with colleagues and friends, legacy media still does play a role when you look at, I think, CBC and CTV and how often we look at the Globe and Mail, which doesn't have the same stories that you might have in...
But not with a new generation.
Right, but I'm thinking about the generation that is still very much guided by what we do in terms of our foreign policy and how we behave. And that's where my concerns... I completely agree with you. A newer generation, we have to so concentrate on the social media. But I do hope that steps can be taken. I know that you look at honest reporting, the efforts made, which are just such an uphill battle. But any thoughts eventually you have on that and how that might be able to... I look at Casey Babbs, who's playing such a... Casey Babb is playing such an important role also in this with the Macdonald-Laurier Institute that hopefully we'll be able to build on that. But
Hopefully.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I think we have time for a few more questions here. We have a question right here and here as well. Right here, there's like a little, yeah, and then next to our other friend as well.
Thank you. My name is Elliot Tepper from Carleton University and MLI.
Right.
Really, I want some comments about Iran. So I'll frame it, the way you framed it so far is that Hamas really derailed the effort toward normalization and derailed the expansion of the Accords.
Not for long.
That's my question. So how do you see things developing? Because the success in demonizing Israel throughout, including Saudi Arabia, is that preventing Saudi Arabia from moving forward because of their domestic situation, because of what has been presented to them in Gaza? Talk to us about Iran and the future of the Abraham Accords.
2 weeks
Saudi
ago,
Arabia.
2 weeks ago, I was in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. I was invited to iftar by the head of the private office of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And immediately afterwards, I flew to Israel to participate in the in filming because I'll be the voice, the Arab voice in the Museum of Tolerance in Jerusalem. But I couldn't fly directly from Saudi to Israel. I had to go to Dubai and take a flight, fly Dubai to Israel. But let me tell you the impressions that I really want you to understand about Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is led by an ambitious Crown Prince, Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He's a very ambitious leader. He wants to take Saudi Arabia to the next level. He believes that the years of radicalization are over. He believes in a prosperous Middle East. He said, Prince Mohammed said that my battle is for the Middle East to become the new Europe, if not even better. And he said in the interview before October 7 that every day we're getting closer for normalizing with Israel. Of course, it's derailed, as you said, but not for long. I see that we will soon have direct flights from Saudi to Israel before the end of 2026, inshallah. I see it this way. Now, that's for Saudi. For Iran, you know, it's so funny that Iran is supporting the Palestinian cause. I'll tell you why. Let me just detail it. Iran is following the Shiite Islam. Shiite Islam, I know it very well. Imam Tawhidi from the Global Imam Council know it very well. It's a denomination. It's the second largest denomination in the Muslim world. And in this denomination of Islam, Jerusalem, the Holy Land, Al-Aqsa Mosque is not there at all. At all. So why did it become significant? I'll tell you the reason that not many people in the West know. When the mullahs came to power in 1979, they looked at the map and they said, well, we have an expansionist ideology that we want to convert the Muslim Sunni countries to become Shiites. It's in our blood. We have to proselytize this. We have to convert the Sunni countries. And these are our targets. So they looked at the map and they said, who is stopping us from doing so? What is the deterrence that could be the problem in doing so? The answer is Israel. So how could we fight Israel? We are the Persians. We don't have a problem with Israel, really. Don't forget that Cyrus the Great was the person who said, and he commanded me to build him a house in Jerusalem that is in Judea. So Cyrus the Great and the Persians had very good amends with Israel or the Jewish people. So how could we do this? Let's hop on the Palestinian cause and pretend that we are supporters of the Palestinians, to remove this deterrence, and then we don't really give a damn about the Palestinian cause, and then we can take control of the Muslim Sunni countries. This is why they made the strategy of the International Day of Al-Quds. When was it significant, Al-Quds, in the Shiite denomination? Never. I'll give you an example. A very famous scholar in the Shiite denomination, his name is Ja'far al-Sadiq. He is one of the disciples of Prophet Muhammad, and not the disciples, I'm sorry, one of the descendants of Prophet Muhammad. And he was asked in the 10th century, what is the big deal of the mosque in Levant? Is it very important for us as Muslims? The mosque in Levant, they were referring to Al-Aqsa Mosque. He said the one in Najaf is more important. The one in Najaf in Iraq is most important. So Iran hopped on the Palestinian cause to get the emotional support from the Muslims who don't really know enough about the Shiite denomination in order to stop the deterrence that would, if it goes away, that would actually allow them to proselytize Sunni countries and convert them to their denomination. That is the real reason why Iran hopped on the Palestinian cause. But they don't really, in their ideology, Palestine, Quds, Jerusalem is not there.
Right.
And it's so funny, I always say this, it's so funny to remind my fellow Muslims that the word Quds comes from the Arabic word Bayt al-Maqdis, which comes from the Hebrew word Bayt HaMikdash. And it's so ironic that I find even some, unfortunately to say this, Pastor, many Arab Christians who come to me and who say, how could you say the Jewish temple Bayt HaMikdash? It's not there, it's the so-called temple. Imagine a Christian would call the temple the so-called temple, and then Jesus in the Bible, he prayed in the temple, and he also preached in the temple, and he recognized the temple. And you have even Arab Christians who say there's nothing called the Jewish temple, it's the so-called temple. And of course, the so-called temple is the propaganda that was populated by Al Jazeera to counter the narrative of the Jews having existence in this land.
Loay, I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions here. Yep. And then Jackie, then we have one more right down here.
I will write a post about what the Shiites, what the Imam, because people, when I said it in one of the, I said it in a Muslim, when I was in Leeds. I'm sorry, when I was in Manchester, I spoke in Manchester school, Manchester Grammar School, and the audience was not Jewish, was not Christian, was Muslim. And when I said that, many people said, where is this written? And when I showed it to them, it was a shock. So I need to write a post. I need to write a post about it. To write a post about it and to show them where this Imam said this about Al-Quds. It had no significance, and suddenly everyone now is waking up and they care about Al-Quds. But of course, we know why that is.
Yeah.
Because Israel is a deterrence against Iran when it comes to expanding their ideology in the Middle East.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Johanna Jochumsdottir. I'm a historian and a researcher. And just want to thank you very much for the many platforms where you appear, including I-24 News, the Israeli station. I've seen you there.
Laura.
With Laura, yes. It's really wonderful what you have to say. I just want to just sort of like comment on and ask you, the many things you speak about are incredibly accurate and incredibly helpful in analyzing the forces of destruction that really are, a reality in our world today. And religious extremism very clearly is one of them, and you articulate this so very well. However, what I most appreciate about what you talk about is the need for knowledge. And so the need for, and the fact is that the way you speak implies and creates a universe where actually Judaism and Christianity and Islam are one. They're actually one religion because you show the interconnectedness, the interrelatedness, the continuity, and literally the fact that you're one people and so are we on the planet. But this is, I think, the most important thing that is lacking in the world today, because for all the good that social media does, it actually does a lot of harm as well, because it feeds, to people what they want to hear, and all the people on the extremist side of these debates are affected from there as well. So my point is, you describe in your journey that you had a change of heart and a change of mind because you had a different experience. You had an opportunity to go to France and live with different people that changed you. And then you talk about their educational system. But how would you see, what is the path forward in terms of the Middle East for many other places to offer such experiences, life experiences to young people, and to create such education systems
You answer the
that
question.
foster this?
You answer the question. You answer the question. You answer the question by having more people-to-people mingling, by having more people speaking to people. When the Abraham Accords happened, many of my relatives from Saudi Arabia and Egypt, they came to the UAE and they said, we want to meet your friends. Your friends is like the Jewish people. We want to meet your friends and sit with them and ask them lots of questions. When Expo happened, many of my friends from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, they visited the Israeli pavilion. And many of them came to me and said, well, your friends are not that bad. Yeah, they are not that good, but they are not that bad. And I do remember that when I was honored by ADL in the ADL annual summit, I shook hands with David Schwimmer, and you have to know one thing: people in the Gulf and in the Arab world, they worship friends. So to them, David Schwimmer is not an actor. David Schwimmer is friends. So when I took a photo with David Schwimmer on stage, it was the only photo in my Instagram that got 24,000 likes. And many people commented, I hate Jews, but I love this guy. So you see the influence? You see the influence? Yeah. You see the influence?
Can I ask you then something, as somebody who has this incredible influence and power, please promote more the idea that actually the world needs educational systems for young children that foster the kind of knowledge that you are also sharing, that you read the Bible, you read the Talmud, you study. Actually, because if we don't have this...
I went through a very tough journey, by the way. So it's a tough journey.
Yeah. I know, may every child go through it and become a young person as you are.
Thank you so much. But I'm just saying, I have to conclude. We have to get people more engaged. And this is the great thing about the Abraham Accords. Peace with Egypt, even though I believe that my hero, President Sadat, was so sincere in making it people-to-people, it failed to be people-to-people. Peace with Egypt is security agreements, especially also with Jordan. But with the UAE, Bahrain, it's people-to-people where people are meeting and mingling. Right. And we need to improve that even more and more. It's now difficult because of the war, but when the war ends, I promise you, this is the next step. And I am working with other entrepreneurs and with other donors to make exchange programs to bring Israelis and Arabs work on a project in Africa where they just do something good and they mingle and they talk and they get to know each other. So you would serve different purposes with one stone. And this is something that I really look forward in building. Exchange program, because how I was changed, how I had the exchange program. It was an exchange program in Paris. Imagine that family wasn't French. Imagine that family wasn't Jewish. I wouldn't be sitting here. So it's an eye-opening to many people.
Loay, thank you for today. We're going to wrap there, but it's been a pleasure to have you and an honor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Thank you so much, Casey, and thank you again for coming, and thank you for bringing an Arab and a Muslim voice to speak up for the counter narrative. And always remember, the non-Jewish allies are your best ally. And with giving us this podium to speak, we are winning together, inshallah. Thank you.
Thanks, Loay.